Hey guys, what is happening? I know you're probably thinking to yourself, hey Toasty, what's with all the talking head videos lately? And to be honest, by the time you're watching this, I'm actually on vacation, visiting my folks in my hometown of redacted location. But these things are easy to edit, they're easy to put up, and you know, I want to keep the content train going, you know what I'm saying? So we got another lore review today from the archives of the Black Library itself. Today we're talking about Belisarius Cawl, the great work written by Guy Haley. And I gotta say right off the bat, kind of like with Servants of the Machine God, if you're looking for an Admech book, saying it. This is a Belisarius Cawl book, it's a Space Marine book, it's even a little bit of a Necron book, but it is not really an Admech book. That isn't to say it's bad, however. In fact, I found this story to be quite enjoyable from the get-go. The story involves three major factions, let's say. We got the Size of the Emperor, a almost completely and totally destroyed Space Marine chapter. I believe, I read this a little while ago, I believe they are successor of the Ultramarines, the Ultramarine Tetrarch Decimus Felix, who is accompanying Belisarius Cawl in investigating the Size of the Emperor home planet in the wake of a Tyranid invasion and utter destruction of that world. So this book, I think, does a lot of things right. First thing it does right, it goes into the sort of horrific realities of a Tyranid invasion and what the sort of post-mortem of that looks like. We get a lot of ideas of what the Tyranids are like to see in live battle and on the battlefield and like actively fighting. But this paints a really awesome and interesting and terrifying picture of what happens after that. What is the planet like? And it is really compelling to read about the sort of setting that they're in on this sort of decimated home planet. Another thing this does really well is actually the Space Marine writing. I thought was like quite good. It wasn't overbearing in I think a lot of the ways that Space Marines can be written. And I thought Decimus Felix, the sort of main Space Marine character for a lot of it, was humanized to a degree that was proper to his station and didn't feel disearnest either. He ends up being quite a deep and interesting character, especially with his relationship to Cawl as a Primaris Marine, one of Cawl's sort of like primary creations. It also strides the lines between past, present, and future in some kind of interesting ways. You know, when Necrons are involved, things get kind of timey-wimey a little bit, but this handles it really well and in really interesting and compelling ways, and allows us to get a glimpse into the backstory of Belisarius Cawl, who he is, the sort of multiple aspects of his personality, both literal and metaphorical. That's really cool. There's a really interesting character, I think, introduced in this book, Alpha Primus, which is the first Primaris Marine successfully created by Cawl, who has some pretty interesting stuff going on with him as well. Not being loyal to a Space Marine chapter, but being loyal to Cawl himself as kind of a bodyguard figure. The Size of the Emperor are also really interestingly portrayed. You know, I think they're written quite effectively as sort of this fallen chapter that is basically set to be replaced by an all Primaris company, or series of companies, I presume. And there's literally, I think, only a handful, like 6 or 7 founding sides left alive at the beginning of this book. So it's a really interesting look at sort of them dealing with their own mortality, the succession of firstborn to Primaris, etc., and sort of like the tumultuous feelings and things like that going on within that Space Marine chapter. And I think that is all also written quite well. So between the Size, between Felix, between Cawl, all of the sort of main protagonists of the book are written in very compelling and interesting ways. And this was a book that just, I breezed through it. I read it extremely quickly because I kept wanting to just get to the next page, figure out what happened, and kind of see how this story ended. As far as the antagonists of the book, we have the Tyranids appearing sporadically, and also the Necrons, as it is, not really a spoiler, but their homeworld is revealed to have been built on an awakening sort of Necron tomb situation, and there's a lot of that stuff happening post-Tyranid invasion. So our sort of meager group of protagonists have to fend off unsurmountable odds and things like that, and it's through more ingenuity, cleverness, and trickiness that they are able to handle that situation without giving too much away, I hope. But I thought this was a very interesting book. In terms of place in the lore, though, I think this is an interesting question that deserves some discussion, as this is a lore review. Canonically, as this book is written, it takes place after the Indominus Crusade. However, the Indominus Crusade, or rather the Plague Wars, which were also set to be taken after the Indominus Crusade, were retconned to be taken 12 years into the Indominus Crusade. And as I understand, the Plague Wars books are still being written. What does that mean for this book and its place in the timeline? I'm not exactly sure. What I think is happening, if I can speculate a little bit, is that with that retcon, this book seems to need to take place after the entire crusade is over, because it's Cawl going on other missions to pursue other things that aren't related to the crusade. Having this take place 12 years into the crusade, I think puts it at a very awkward spot. So I think I need to assume, at least until I am corrected or told otherwise, that this still does, despite the retcon, happen after the Indominus Crusade. That being said, I think in terms of plot and lore importance, this book is also fairly high up there. Belisarius Cawl is a major player in the universe of 40k, entering into the 42nd millennium. Dealing with the Crusade and even post-Crusade, this book I think sets up a lot of things that we're going to see in the future as the story of the tabletop game kind of progresses. This is a little bit of a taste of what's to come, I think, in terms of how the lore, maybe some box sets in the future past Octarius, could provide some insights into things that might happen. It sets up a couple of really big cliffhangers. It sets up a couple of really big kind of like dangling hooks for plot and story going forward. As it's titled, The Great Work, it really signals Cawl starting off the next sort of post-Crusade chapter of what he's going to be doing, and what probably the Admech, at least the ones that are loyal to him, are going to be sort of focusing their time and energy on, presumably under the orders of Guilliman himself. So really interesting to kind of see that. The other sort of interesting things that happen lore-wise, there's some looks, besides Cawl's history, there's some looks into Cawl Inferior, which is sort of his definitely not heresy, definitely not AI robot that is with Guilliman in sort of his ship and advises Guilliman. So there's some really interesting stuff happening there as well that's hinted at in this book. So overall, I would say in terms of lore importance, this is a 5 out of 5. In terms of actual story, execution, and interest, this is, I think, an easy 4 out of 5 in terms of just recommendation. In terms of entry into the franchise, if this is your first Warhammer book, it could be a little bit confusing, but not a bad read. I'd give this maybe a 2.5 to a 3 out of 5. Yeah, in terms of series entry, in terms of kind of newbie friendliness. Overall, though, very solid read. Definitely a recommended book to anybody who is really interested in sort of the modern 40k era, with the Imperium being split in two. I personally think the galaxy as it is currently is one of the more interesting states it's been in recent Warhammer history, and I'm really excited to kind of see what happens next, and I'm really excited to see where this sort of plot line goes. So absolutely recommended. Guy Haley, Belisarius Cawl, the great work. Although it's not an Admech book, there's a lot of really good stuff in here. Thank you guys for joining. As far as my schedule is concerned, there's going to be another book review coming down the road, as well as maybe another other talking head video. I'm not exactly sure yet, but I'm enjoying myself on vacation. Probably, I assume. I'm not actually there yet. As always, if you like this video, if you found this review helpful, please leave a thumbs up. It really helps me out. Leave a comment. If you've read this book before, tell me what you thought, you know? Did it live up to your expectations? And if you want to see more book reviews, more lore reviews, and more hobby content, be sure to subscribe. And I'll see you guys next time. Peace.